Yeah, it was like Christmas in May. It was great. Yeah, I brought in the trash and recycling, and I walk into the recycling center, and the way they have it set up is there's a table for glass and table for plastic and table for cardboards and paper, and then they had a table for tin and aluminum. And right in the middle of the table for tin and aluminum was a beautiful, like pristine shape Coleman stove.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the RV Atlas. Today, I'm thrilled to have back on the show my camping buddy, Phil Travaglia. Phil and I recently tent camped at North South Lake in the Catskills, and we had an amazing, amazing weekend. This is one of the best public campgrounds in all of New York State. It is the most popular campground in the Catskills, and it is simply one of the best campgrounds in all of New York State and in all of the Northeast. North South Lake is a beloved campground. So, in the first half of the podcast, Phil and I are going to review the campground just like we always review campgrounds. We'll talk about bringing an RV there, we'll talk about tent camping there. No matter what you want to do there, we'll give you the skinny and give you the breakdown. And then in the second half of the show, we're going to come back with Phil, and Phil's going to break down his tent camping setup because he literally has the perfect setup for a weekend tent camping trip. I love all of the gear that he brings together, the way that he sets up the eating section, the way that he sets up the tents. This guy just has everything down. And it actually sort of inspired me for my next tent camping trip that I took. And a lot of this stuff is very RV applicable. It really is his RV setup that he uses when he's camping in his RV, just slightly modified for the tent camping trip. So I'm thrilled to have Phil on the show. We're going to come back in a second, give you an awesome review of North South Lake in the Catskills in New York State. But before we do so, we have a sponsored message from our friends at Blackstone. And the Blackstone came out on this tent camping trip, and I made some awesome smash burgers. So we'll be right back in a second. But first, a message from Blackstone. Hello, Phil Travaglia, and welcome back to the RV Atlas, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm so
I
excited to be on the show again.
I love having you on the show. Your episodes are always top performing episodes. So no pressure, buddy. We've
No
been
pressure at all.
No
Just
pressure at all. We've been talking about tent camping for several years, and we finally did it, right? We finally made it happen.
we did. We got out there, and it was awesome. It was a great trip.
It was a super great trip. So for everybody listening, Phil and I went tent camping at North South Lake in the Catskills. We're going to give you a review of the campground. So that for the first half of the podcast, we'll just give you the type of campground review we've always given on the RV Atlas, and we'll talk about RVs and tenting there because you can do both. And then in the second part of the podcast, we're going to come back and talk about Phil's tent camping setup because it's literally perfect and amazing. And I was in awe of it. And I want you to share some of the gear that you use when you're tent camping, which you also use when you're RVing too. But let's dive right into this review of North South Lake in New York State. You're a New Yorker, Phil. So can you tell us, where is this campground located in the beautiful and amazing state of New York?
It's up in the Catskills, about an exit away from Woodstock off the New York State Thruway. So it's about, I'd say about 40 minutes from, a little more than 40 minutes from Albany. And it takes me from Long Island uh, just under 3 hours to get there from the island, depending on traffic.
Yeah, for me, coming from New Jersey, it was just under 3 hours. It's almost a straight line, straight up from the Jersey Shore, on the Garden State Parkway. So I guess from New York City, you could say that it's around 2 hours, I would think, right?
Yeah. I would say that's a fair assessment. Yep.
Now, on their website, they say that this is the most popular campground in the Catskills. Um, this is a very, very popular campground. How long ago did you make the reservations just to get a site here?
I'm looking at my Reserve America right now. I'm trying to think. It probably was about 4 or 5 months I made it in advance. When we talked about doing the tent camping, I figured the only way we're going to actually make it make it happen is if as soon as we got home from the RV trip that we're on with you guys, I got right online and booked it. So I'd say it was about 4 or 5 months. But remember, we bumped into those fellows when we were hiking, and they said that they booked a couple of sites. The guy was right across from us last minute, and they had no trouble getting it in there.
No, just for
So
fun, I checked to see if there was availability for this coming weekend. Not because I'm going again, but because I just wanted to give our listeners a sense of how hard it is to book. And it was completely sold out for this upcoming
mm,
weekend, which doesn't mean there might not be cancellations or something like that. But this is a popular campground.
yeah,
It's also not a state park, but it is run by the state. It's run by the state's Department of Environmental Conservation. So in New York, you have your New York State Parks, which is an amazing system. But then you have also a whole separate network that's run by the DEC. When you put those two together, Phil, New York has absolutely amazing state public campgrounds. Would you agree?
absolutely. There are so many. I mean, New York State is one of those states that is kind of like a hidden gem in the sense that there are so many places to go camping, and the state campground system is enormous, and and one place after the next is more beautiful than the next, and it's there's just so much space and so many places to go. There, New York State is a great resource and a great place to go camping for sure.
And you, really also love Hither Hills and Montauk, right? And you've reviewed
Yeah.
that here on the RV Atlas. I'll link to that in the show notes. You could spend your life camping in New York State. I mean, I feel like some people within the state, that's their camping. They just camp within New York State because there's so many
Mhm.
options.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think New York is very similar to Florida in the sense that I think there's just endless state park camping available to you out there. Just a big state with a lot of land and a lot of places to go. So
A-
it's been a long time exploring.
Awesome. All right, let's dive into the actual campground itself.
Hmm.
So we talked a lot about like which loops we liked the best and what we would recommend to people or what we would like to get next time we come back. So could you just break down like what the campground looks like, the different loops and maybe, like your best option, your second best option? What should our listeners try to reserve if they can when visiting North South Lake?
Sure. So North South Lake, basically, just like the name says, has a North Lake and a South Lake. The majority of the camping is available around the North Lake. I'm just going to hold up. I don't know how well it's going to turn out on the camera, but I'm going to hold up the camping map for the campground, and you can see there are the two lakes, and you can see where right here that's where the majority of the campsites are. So those are surrounding the North Lake, and those are loops 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. And where we walked, because we did that walk around to kind of check out all the premium lakeside sites. Loop 3 is there too. Sites like 145 to like 167, like 151, 150, 167, 148, 149. Those were the beautiful ones that we took pictures of. They're all along the water. They had the great scenery. And those would be the ones that I would think that you need to be 9 months and 1 second after the clock to book those sites, because those were just really nice.
They're
And
like
then we had a campsite.
magnificent sites. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So that's it. Like first choice, waterfront if you can get it.
Absolutely. And then we had a site in Loop 2, and we were along, there's like a little river bed that runs through the campsites that eventually ends up to the lake. And it borders Loop 1 and Loop 2. And sites 31, 39, 38, 30, 32, those are all right on the riverside in Loop 2. And then 7, 9, 11, 13, 14 in Loop 1. Those are all right along the riverbed. And we kept marveling at how pretty it made the campsite seem. Like, to have that natural border behind us where you're sitting down, you look out and you see a nice creek bed with water trickling through and stuff. And it made a big difference. And those are just really nice sites. They were spacious and scenic, definitely.
So it seemed like both you and I agreed that if you can get a site on the lake, get a site on the lake. If you can't
Mhm.
get a site on the lake, get a site along that stream bed.
Yeah.
And that's as your second choice. And then your third choice is anything else in loops 1 through 6.
Pretty much. Yeah. definitely.
Now, what
Anything
about
else?
Loop 7's a little bit of an outlier. Tell us about Loop 7.
So loop seven's a small little loop, and it's pretty much you come across it immediately after you get through the main gate and you check in, and it's totally landlocked. And I'd say it's got probably about 25 or 30 sites on it, and it's just isolated and quiet. So not such great scenery. You've got nicely wooded sites, but there's not really much going on in terms of feeling like your surroundings. But if you're looking for maybe a place that you're going to do some remote work on your computer, or you just want some time where you're just going to get the tent set up, you're just going to kick your feet up in a hammock and read a book, you just want quiet and peace, that's a good loop to go to for sure.
Now, we
It's
were
almost
both
like an overflow.
Yeah, that's exactly like it's like that's to me would be my last choice because it's a bit further away from both of the lakes. We were
Yeah.
both really surprised. We got to the campground and we went down to the lake for a walk. I think we were both shocked to see a lot of empty lakefront sites, right?
Yeah, yeah. But the weather was iffy that weekend. So I think a lot of people, the beauty of a state park is, you make a reservation. If you're a state resident, it's only $22 a night there. So I think a lot of people booked for the weekend. And when they saw the weather was going to be so, if they're going intense and they weren't feeling up to, dealing with the weather and intense, they probably just said it's not even a headache to just not show up. I'm going to lose $20 or $30 or $40 for the weekend. So we did
Well,
notice that. Yeah.
a lot of people are seeing that all over the place, particularly at state parks where the price of camping is so cheap. These waterfront sites are so hard to get, and even though we had a slightly iffy weekend weather-wise, we still had fun. It wasn't that bad. A
Yeah.
lot
The
of
weather
people would have
wasn't terrible.
loved to Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, yeah, the weather wasn't terrible at all. I mean, we had a couple of showers here and there, but it was like it added to the whole experience. It was fine. It wasn't a torrential nightmare of a weekend or anything like that. So yeah, got to stick it out sometimes. Take the chances. So,
I was sad to see those sites unoccupied, and I think people are seeing that
mhm.
all over the place where the price of the sites is so low. Sometimes people just don't show up. So, which site did you select? And you did a great job, buddy. What did you think
Well,
of the
thank
site
you.
we were on?
So we were in site number 39 on Loop 2. And I loved it. I thought it was a great site. It had plenty of space. We set up our entire thing. Um, we had room for your tent. We had room for my tent. We had room for our canopy for our cooking and living space area there. And I had my kayak out, and it was plenty of room. And we had the river stream bed on the back of the site. So I thought it was great. If we couldn't get anything right on the lake, I'd go back to that site again. Definitely.
Oh, I would take that site again in a second. I would recommend bring bug spray. I think particularly if you're along that stream bed. It wasn't horribly buggy, and I think I showed up, hopped out of my truck, and I was like, "Oh, there's some skeeters here." And you handed me the bug spray, and that took care of it, and it didn't bother me the rest of the weekend. But maybe a little bit buggier along that stream bed. Just so
Hmm.
everybody listening knows, there are no hookups at the sites here. But
Hmm.
there are RVers and there are RVs at this campground. I think that we would both say it's about 80% tent campers, 20% RVers. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, that sounds exactly right on. And the bathhouses are conveniently located. So even though there are no hookups, if you need to get water or you need to use the facilities, it's a short walk. It's not terrible at all. I felt that they were convenient. Plus, they had spigots in different places where you can go to kind of save yourself a few steps instead of having to go to the bathhouse to get to the sinks or anything like that. So, but yeah, I'd say 80 to 20 ratio for campers and RVs for sure.
And it's a little, I mean, I personally I would not take my 32-foot Grand Design there. There are some twists and turns, there are some tight roads. I think that most of the RVs there were, smaller, 15 foot, 20 foot. That's not to say there
Hmm.
weren't a couple of larger RVs there, but I would certainly take caution. And my sense of it is that anyone there with a larger RV or a somewhat larger RV is probably familiar with the campground. I don't think it would be a good idea to show up your first time there with any kind of a larger rig, even though certain sites may technically be able to accommodate it. I think I would say this is just not a big rig friendly campground. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think you'd have to be like a surgeon. Like you'd have to be able to be like super precise in the way you maneuver your rig if you had something over like I'd say like 23, 24 feet because it was there are a lot of tight turns, low trees, branches, things like that. I felt like the few places where we saw the bigger sites, the bigger rigs were on the waterfront sites. They seem to be a little bit more open, some of them, and accommodating for bigger rigs. But uh, unless you're super familiar with that place, I wouldn't take my big rig there for the first time and just kind of see what happens. You might get yourself into trouble.
All right, for sure. Now, the general vibe here. Now, look, we're both RV guys. We're both RV owners, and we've both camped a ton in all kinds of different places over the years. But this was kind of a nice breath of fresh air for me, going to more of a tent centric campground and just kind of seeing everybody's tenting setups and all the gear they were using, and it was a lot of fun for me to do something a little bit different. Now, what was the general atmosphere like? The general vibe? Was it quiet? Was it noisy? What was it like at a more tent centric state campground?
Well, the weekend we were there, I thought it was quiet. There was one group there in one of the more distant loops away from us that were was pretty young and they were kind of kicking around and making some noise, but they weren't loud past the quiet hours. And in general, the whole campground for the most part was just it was very kind of like a very like it was like a positive, mellow, happy you know environment. Everybody was happy to be there, and it's what's fun, and I never really noticed so much before. But like the passion that people put into setting up their sites when they RV camp with their gear and everything they do, like the tent camping community is the same way. I mean, you can see that in the creativity of all the different setups that people have, and that's kind of what I like about it because it's fun. You get people come up with different hacks and cheats and ways to come up and beat the weather and create comfort and make their own like little setup that's perfect to them. And so it was a good, relaxed, laid back kind of environment. Definitely, there was not one of those state park feels that you worry about. And sometimes people report that it's a campground where people just go to party. This was definitely not that,
This
not
is
at
like a
all.
camp, like a real camper's campground, if that
Yeah,
makes sense. And
absolutely.
I also, you and I are on the same wavelength with just so many things. Like I've really enjoyed seeing everyone's tent camping setups, and there was everything from people with basically like nothing but a tent to people that really were creating elaborate outdoor setups,
Hmm.
having large meals outside, like multi-course meals and playing, lovely music and everything.
Hmm.
People were almost there were people glamping there, right? Even though
Yeah,
this was state park, no hookups, $22 a night. There were no glamping tents or cabins or anything, but people were having a glamping experience, all with things that they
yeah,
brought out of their cars.
yeah.
And you did an amazing job setting up, but we're going to hold that and talk about that later. Um,
Thank you.
so we're going to come back in a second. We're going to talk a bit more about North South Lake Campground in the Catskills in New York State. But before we do so, we have a sponsored message from our friends at Camco. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We are here with my buddy Phil Travalia, who I've RV'd with many times over the years. And this was a tent camping trip at North South Lake Campground, probably one of the most popular public campgrounds in all of New York State. It is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful campground. We kind of mentioned this, Phil, but how far in advance can you book? And just remind everybody what you paid again for the sites per night.
Sure. I believe you could book up to 9 months in advance on Reserve America. And I paid because I'm a New York State resident. I paid $22 a night. I am not sure of what the non-state resident fee is, but it can't be. I would say more than probably 35 or $40 a night. Reserve America is great. Their staff is good. They'll explain all the different pricing and the different you know the fees if there are any for changing reservations or cancellations and things like that. I booked us about like 4.5 months in advance, or 5 months in advance, I think. Um, but at that time, all the lakefront sites were gone for the weekend that we were going, and but there was still plenty of sites around, and we got that nice creekside site. So it's easy. Reserve America is very good. They just updated their software. I just had to reset my password and everything. So their website is very useful and helpful in getting you in there.
One thing I love about the Reserve America for North South Lake, anyway, is that there's a picture of every site when you click
Hmm.
on the site map, so you can see your site, and it will tell you the length of the vehicle you can have in that site in terms of bringing an RV. But as we pointed out already, it may say, "Oh, a 40-foot vehicle can fit in this site," but you've got to get to the site first, and there are some twists and turns. So
Yeah,
again, better for smaller RVs. Now, amenities
yeah.
here are pretty simple and straightforward for a public
Mhm.
campground, but there were some things to do. So, what did the campground have in terms of amenities, Phil?
Well, they had a beautiful beach, which was not manned by a lifeguard when we were there. I think because it was still early in the season. I think it was we went before Memorial Day, right? So it
Yes.
was. I think after Memorial Day, they'll probably have lifeguards on duty. Um, they have you can fish, plenty of places to fish. They had this nice little bridge that this young couple were fishing off of with their dog, and they were hanging out and looking at the ducks. They have volleyball and playground. There's a dump station. There's a recycling center. Um, so you can take your trash at night. There are they did discuss about bears in the area. So at night you do want to lock up your food in the car. These are the things they told us, and make sure that there's no trash on the campsites. But it was, and you could rent boats, and you can put kayaks and paddle boards and things like that in the water. I don't believe you're allowed to take a motorboat in the lake, but we saw some people paddle boarding. We saw some people swimming, even though there weren't lifeguards. So there's plenty of things to do. There's tons of hiking, tons of hiking.
Yeah, a
And as
couple
far
keep.
as yep, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Yes.
Finish.
So as far as the bathhouses, I think the way you described it best really hit it. Like our bathhouse for our loop was simple. It was also under construction, so the showers weren't available. But that's a good sign because they're putting money in it and they're upgrading and they're making sure that the amenities are there for the campers. We used a larger bathhouse in a different loop, and those showers were amazing and clean, and so they're simple, but they're clean and they're functional, and that's really all you're looking for. And I didn't feel uncomfortable about the amenities in terms of bathhouses and showers and things like that at all.
Yeah, there were private showers. A couple of things here. When we checked in, I asked about swimming, and they said there's no lifeguard yet, but you can swim. Just stay close to the beach and don't go out too far. That's actually what somebody working there told me. So they weren't being like hyper strict about saying you couldn't dive into the water if you wanted to cool off. Also, that recycling center. We're at the very end of this podcast. Something kind of amazing and cool happened at the recycling center to Phil. Hang on at the end of the show. That is how we will end this very episode. Now, you mentioned this is a great hiking park, and it is truly, truly an incredible campground for hiking. There are many, many excellent hikes, and you can leave right from your site. So, why don't you tell everybody about the hike that we did and one or two other ones? Well, we actually did a couple. Tell everyone about the hikes that we did, and then maybe what we would do if we went back.
Yeah, well, we did the Kaaterskill Falls hike. That was our primary big hike, and that was great. That was it was not overly challenging, but it wasn't like a total cakewalk. So you got a good sweat. And we first started by walking up to the observation pier. We thought that was where we would have to go. And we got to the observation pier and we looked down 100 feet and we saw this beautiful pools and this gorgeous waterfall and about 9 million people down there. We're like, we want to be one of them. and we,
It
so
was crowded.
yeah, it was crowded, but not like overly crowded where it was unenjoyable by any means. The crowd that was there and the feel of being crowded was actually, it was like a positive energy. It was good. Where it was like nice to see a lot of people out in nature and looking to do nature, and we bumped into a park ranger, and he told us a way to get around, and it was just a short, 3/4 of a mile walk up and over a bridge and down. It was had to have been 100 steps, uh, maybe more, that were carved out of stone that they put down. I mean, tremendous amount of work to get it, and you got you right down to the bottom of the waterfalls. It was beautiful,
It
and
is a world class. I believe it's the tallest waterfall in New York. I hope I'm right about that. It's a world class hike. It's like a national park quality hike right there at North South Lake.
yeah, it was very nice. It was great. I mean, and we got down there, and the beauty of the nature was great, but it was also the beauty of the experience with the people too. I mean, like, we saw people from all walks of life there. There was this young group of guys from a fraternity and a school in Pennsylvania that they meet every year, and they come down, and they just that's how they keep in touch. They come and they hike the falls, and they stay in town. They weren't staying at the campground, but they came and took the hike in, and then we saw, you know, old folks, young folks, babies, kids, and being carried on backpacks and papooses and stuff like that. It was great. That's the best part of being out and being in nature. That's the whole thing.
I'm
So
smiling ear to ear listening to you recount the hike. You're just describing it so perfectly. It was just like this cross section of American life, all types of people, everybody having fun, everybody enjoying nature. Like I didn't like I know some people are like, "Oh, I don't want to hike where there's a
yeah,
crowd," or I like that energy on the trail, and everybody was friendly and nice, and you were talking to people and I
yeah,
was talking to people. It was wonderful.
it
Um
was a lot of
so
fun. It was great. It really
so
was.
what other hike did we do in our short trip?
We did the the mountaintop hike where we went to the old hotel, the old Catskill Hotel, and that's no longer there. The Catskill Mountain House that's what it was. I'm sorry, the name escaped me for a minute. But back in the early 1900s, there was this beautiful, incredible mountain house for the rich and wealthy elite, like the Vanderbilts of the time, and it was right on this cliff edge. And so they have a big placard that shows you where the actual hotel was. The hotel's not there anymore, but the hike was short. It was right at the end of the main parking lot. There was a short trailhead, and it took us about 15 minutes. And you're standing there over this breathtaking view of the valley, and you can see smoke coming up from campfires. You can see clouds touching down in different places. You see the shadows of the clouds moving over the treetops. I mean, it was just beautiful. And if you don't say a word, you just hear nothing but silence, which was just like a nice treat, because we don't get too much silence around my house anyway with two teenagers.
Oh
So
god, there's never silence in my house. I can't believe I'm about to say this on the podcast, but I will. Just before Phil and I were about to hit record and I was trying to get to the microphone. I had a loud teenager screaming for toilet paper in my house, and I was a little bit delayed. But it was a very peaceful hike, and there was only two other people up there when we hiked up there,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. There was only two other people. There was a couple there. They packed like a little picnic basket. They had wine and cheese, and they were sitting on the bench. They had guy had a great set of binoculars. They looked like military grade binoculars, and they were just sitting, drinking some wine and eating some cheese, and looking out with the binoculars over the valley, picking out different sites and spots. And it was great. It was nice. We went exploring, looking around here and there, and they, it was great. Wasn't like we were on top of them and interfering with their experience. They were, not interfering with ours. It's just the beauty about this place is that there's so much space to enjoy it and be around other people, but not feel like you're right on top of them too, which is nice.
Now, the ranger had recommended another hike that we didn't get to, and I think that we would certainly like to do it if we go back. Obviously we didn't do this hike, but what is this other hike that's considered really really great where you can take off right from your campsite?
So it was North Point, and it's almost a 360-degree view from the top of this peak. And I have up right now, when folks are listening to this, if they go to the All Trails website, and they type in Artist Rock Catskills, those two words, then you're going to get a whole bunch of things. And one of them is it describes a loop where Artist Rock was another trail hike that we were told about that we never got to. There's a nice 6 mile loop. You can see something called Artist's Rock, and there's a picture of it. Looks beautiful. Sunset Rock and Newman's Ledge via Mary's Glen Trail. Now, Mary's Glen Trail, when you go online and you look at the map of the campground, is right in the campground itself. So you don't even have to leave the campground to get to a trailhead. That'll give you a nice 6 mile hike with very rewarding views, because the views are very nice. And then North Point is also, the trailhead is also right within the campground. And again, short hike, maybe a 3 mile round trip hike with beautiful, you know, almost 360 views. And it's just breathtaking up there. It really is. There's a lot to do that we still can, that we haven't done yet.
If you love hiking, it does not get much better than North South Lake, because I mean, I love when you don't have to drive to a trailhead. Like, I truly love when you can put on your hiking boots at your campsite and take off and then return to your campsite. And North South Lake is that campground. Now, the
Mhm.
campground is somewhat remote, and there's not a lot of, stores or shopping around it immediately. But we did go to two very cool stores.
Mhm.
The one that is closest to the campground, most people basically say, like, it's the general store for the campground. Now, it's not run by the state or anything, it's a private business, but it's called the Twilight General Store, and it's just an old school general store that I think that we brought out the inner boy in both of us, and we both
Yeah.
kind of loved the Twilight General Store. So,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that place. It's right
It's
outside of
just,
the campground too.
yeah, it's great. It's just, it had, it had a whole like gift section where they had, keychains and shot glasses and things like that with the town's name, sweatshirts, t-shirts, and hats and stuff along those lines. And then the side that I liked was more like the general store side, where it had like just you know all the odds and ends, knickknacks in terms of camping supplies that you needed, like an extra funnel for your Coleman white fuel, or extra tent spikes and things like that. We even saw they had the replacement plunger for the pressure tanks for the Coleman stoves and the lanterns. You never see that stuff anywhere.
Oh,
They
you
had
got to stop.
slingshots.
We've got to stop there and enjoy that for a second. This place sells spare parts for classic Coleman lanterns. Like, that's how legit this place is. Now, it's also very. We were joking. It's very possible that they've had those things for 20 years and no one's bought
Yeah,
them. But
that's
it
probably
was
on the
amazing.
shelf.
Yeah, it was amazing to me. Like, this place is like old school dirtbag camping supplies, general store,
Hmm.
just real traditional and cool. Also, really good ice cream,
Ice
right?
cream. Yeah. Oh yeah. Ice cream was down dynamite. That was I got a chocolate brownie ice cream that was ridiculous, unbelievable. Yeah. So, but yeah, no, it was a great store. It was a lot of fun. I mean, they had pocket knives and slingshots and you know you name it. There was the beer, the soda, the ice, the chips, everything, and it was humming. There were campers in and out, constantly flowing through. It was a lot of fun. It was a rainy day and you got absolutely nothing to do. You can go kill an hour in that store without a doubt. So,
And so there was like nothing pretentious about it. It was just kind of like this old school general store with a
mm-hmm,
camping vibe. But then a bit further up the road, we went to a place that was a bit more kind of like for the glampers, for maybe the city folks coming
hmm.
out who want organic foods and fancy
Yeah,
soaps and shampoos, but also some kind of cool camping stuff, the bare bones lanterns and things like that. So
hmm.
tell us a little bit about the Circle W General Store, and what did we get there? What was your take on that place, Phil?
Well, that was a great place too in its own way. It was just like you said. It had, I think, a little more upscale stuff in terms of supplies on the shelves. It had a very nice, like little coffee station set up. They had great pastries there. They made great sandwiches. I wound up getting breakfast sandwich on the ride out on Sunday, and we stopped and when we were checking out the stores for the podcast, got coffee. Their coffee is very good. They sell nice candles and soaps for the ladies and things like that. And it just, the outside of the building was what struck me, because it was just beautiful construction, old. very old and traditional looking general store style, red metal roof, white sides, black shake shingles. Black shingles on the sides of the windows. It looked great. They had nice signage on the side, that old fashioned signage, the tin signage. They even
Vintage
had
RV.
they had a vintage RV that on Sunday when I left, I talked to the lady, and they don't even use it anymore, but they had it. They used to serve sandwiches out of it. So, it was, but it just added to the feel of the place. And it was really nice.
Oh, I
And
loved it.
so, yeah, it was great. But two really good places that between both of them, you'll find whatever it is you need to kind of, resupply or bolster your supplies when you're
Both
there.
sides of New York's camping soul too, like the glamping side,
Mhm. Yep.
or just the traditional camping side. No, you said I think you said soaps and shampoos for the ladies, but I think you meant to say soaps and shampoos for Jeremy because
Yeah.
Jeremy bought some fancy Dr. Bronner's soaps there that he loves so much. So, look, I loved both stores because I love both styles of camping.
Mhm.
So love both of them. So stop at both on your way in. Now, that's our campground review. Phil, I'd give this place a 10 out of 10. Like, I mean, it's an amazing place. I'd love to see them update a bit more of the facilities, and some of the signs are getting old and stuff like that. You did point out they're redoing some of the bathhouses, but to me, I this is about as good as it gets for public campgrounds in America. I feel like this place is amazing. It's a bucket list place. I mean, are you that much in love with North South Lake as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I would 100% agree because it's just a really it's I feel like it's a well maintained state park, and there's a presence. We saw rangers, we saw DEC folks in their cars. We're always passing somebody who worked for the state driving through the campsite, so you never felt like you had to worry if like you got in a bind, you got a flat tire, or you needed some help or whatever. There was always, you felt that was accessible that way. The fact that they were doing work on our bathhouse was like a big plus to me. And just the atmosphere and in itself, it was just a good like camping atmosphere. When you go camping for the first time, this is like the type of place you want to go because you're going to experience nature. You're also going to have people around you so you don't feel isolated. And you're really just going to say, all right, I could do this again. This is fun. And I could do it in a place like this for sure.
Oh my god, we wanna go back so badly. Okay, we're gonna come back. This is like 2 podcasts in one today. We're gonna come back, and Phil's gonna break down his literally perfect tent camping setup. I stepped out of my truck, and you were all set up, and I was like, "This guy has literally nailed it with the tent camping setup, with the gear," some of which is also like your RV setup.
Yeah.
So we're gonna come back with almost like a bonus section of this podcast to talk about your amazing setup from this trip and all the gear that you use and love. But before we do so, we have a sponsored message from our friends at RV SnapPad. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We are here with Phil Travalia, who is an amazing camper. Like you've got it down. You inspire me. I'm a complete gearhead. And when I see how you set things up, I'm like, there's you don't bring anything you don't need. You literally bring everything that is useful and will be used. So let's break it down. Let's talk about your setup for this trip, and let's start with canopies. Okay, that was a big part of your setup. What were you using, and how did you use them?
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, thank you for the compliments, by the way. And I think if I had to label it, I would be a minimalist gearhead because I love my gear, but I try not to like bring too much stuff because we just just don't have the room for it. Plus, I can't store it in the house. I get myself in trouble at home if you know what I mean. So,
Well,
but,
look, you are the gear. You love gear, and you're the gear minimalist. I love gear, and I'm the gear maximalist. And I've written about this before on our website. Like, I think yours is the preferable way, and mine is not the preferable way. You don't want extra things that just take up space. So I loved the canopy setup. What were you using?
so I use Coleman makes these eaved canopies. They're shelters, and they're 13 by 13 squares under the eave, and the frame itself is a 10-foot interior frame. So the legs are at 10 feet square, and the eave extends outside of the legs, and it just gives you extra coverage from the rain or from the sun. And they're super easy to put up, um, and they're very reasonably priced. I bought mine at Costco for $140. It's probably maybe a little bit more now, just because everything seems to be going up. But the second one that I purchased, I found a Kmart in a clearance aisle for $75, and they're great, and they hold up to the wind, they hold up to the rain, and they make a huge difference because they give you the coverage you need. And that's the brand that I like, because the eaves really make a difference to give you that extra space. It's worth the extra couple of bucks if you have to.
And tell us how you used both of them. And we had a weekend with intermittent rain, and you literally it saved us. I mean, the way you set it up was perfect. How did you use those canopies?
So one canopy I used for our cooking slash living space. So I basically it's big enough where you can slide a standard picnic table from the campground underneath it. And then what I did was I set up my cooking table. It's a multi-shelved table that I got at Dick's Sporting Goods, and there are pictures of all this on the show notes. And so I set that up underneath the awning. Have a Coleman stove, one of the old-fashioned guys. That mine is a 413G, I think. It was made in 1967, and it still works like the day it was made. And I absolutely love it. And that sits right on the table. That's my main heat source. Um, and then those shelves, we wind up just putting a bunch of, stuff that you're going to use. I put my bottled waters under there. I put, my extra fuels, my cooking supplies, things along those lines, utensils and stuff on there. And then in the corners, I set up small tables, like, just accessory tables. And I wound up picking up at a local supply store by me, a sporting goods store, these collapsible Coleman uh, cooler stands, they call them, or stove stands. And they're really great. They telescope, they're made of aluminum, they fold up, and they're very compact in terms of taking up space, but they're durable and they can hold quite a bit of weight. And I use that as the base. And I went to Home Depot, and Home Depot had these hardwood tool cabinet tops made by Husky. They're about $30 each, and they're very nice. They look good, and they're also weatherproof. They're finished and in high varnish, and they sit right on top. And it's just a flat piece of wood, so they don't take up an awful lot of space when you're packing. And I put one of those in each corner, so we have extra space to put, a small cooler full of ice and some cups for drinks. The other side, with the other table, I usually put a single burner butane stove, where I put I have a Coleman oven, a collapsible Coleman oven, aluminum oven. That's great. We made biscuits with our dinner that night. They came out really good. And so, like, everything has a place. And then hanging from the corner, I had it's very old. They don't even make that model anymore, but I put something similar to that up I just grabbed something online and put a picture up, but like a collapsible cabinet that hangs from the corner scaffolding of the canopy. So that held our paper towel and our paper plates, and it held the coffee, and it held the can openers and the utensils and things like that. So everything's in a spot that it's off the ground, it's dry. So the stuff that you don't want to get wet stays dry. And, what I did was I put up two Coleman walls. They make these great sun walls. And the sun walls are like really what make the biggest difference, because when there's rain, even though you're covered under the canopy, a lot of times the rain hits the ground and it splatters, and you wind up getting, a little bit of wet, a little bit of sand, a little bit of dirt kicked up. But I put two walls in and formed a corner on two out of the four walls of the canopy. And that just kind of provided good protection from the rain and from any kind of splashing. It protected us from the wind. And I had a third wall if we needed it, but we didn't need it because the rain wasn't that bad. But the walls make a huge difference. And sometimes they don't fit as well as they're supposed to. So I bring a container of plastic zip ties, and just some zip ties and a good pair of scissors to cut them off at the end. But you can zip tie them to make sure they hold up and stay in place. And I mean, you remember that made all the difference in terms of the weather, those walls.
Oh, not just the
So,
weather, but also creates privacy, in a
yes.
nice way where you're not sitting, eating, looking at look, the sites were big here and there was lots of trees and everything. But it
Hmm.
created a nice private dining area, and we had rain. We were eating
Yeah.
dinner in the rain,
Hmm.
and it was a game changer having that canopy set up. And then you still had
Yeah.
yet another canopy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
how
the
did you?
second canopy, I put my tent under, and that's just cheating because I'm over 50. And I want to be comfortable. So, I put my Coleman 6-person tent underneath the canopy, and it fits completely under the footprint of the awnings and the eaves, and there's no rain that drips off the sides and hits the tent at all. And we're actually out with you guys up in Turkey Swamp, and we had a torrential weekend with the camper, but I had brought the tent to sleep out in the tent just to give it a try, and stayed bone dry. And that's when I learned that putting the canopy over the top of the tent is just like a great way to make sure you stay comfortable and dry. And we really, that I won't do it any other way after that.
I mean, talk about waterproofing your tent, right? I mean, that tent
Hmm.
is completely waterproof. Now, and you like that Coleman tent as well. It was a nice, comfortable tent for you. You fit a huge air mattress in
Hmm.
there and some other stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's a spacious tent. That again, another cost go by. It was like $110 at the time, and it had the blackout technology, which actually made a pretty decent difference. When the sun comes up, the light doesn't, really like bombard you. And I was able to put in a queen size air mattress. I have a little collapsible shelf system that I put in for like my clothes and everything like that. I can put a lantern on it and stay organized. I had room for a portable, luggable loo, which is, like it's just a self contained potty that you bring. Like, again, big game changer that a lot of people don't realize is, if you don't have to get up in the middle of the night to walk to the bathhouse, or if it's raining, you don't have to get out in the wet weather to go walk to the bathhouse. It's there for nighttime and bad weather, and for number one only. And that's made a huge difference, because it's very convenient, and it saves you from having to get up and get out and do things
Oh,
to get to the bathroom.
and for us RV owners, right? I mean, we're RV owners who are tent camping. To
Hmm.
have those portable travel toilets is absolutely awesome. I also brought one.
Hmm.
Really, really makes a big, big difference to not have to walk all the way, to the bathhouses to use the bathroom in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
That the grill, I just really want to mention that grill stand that you use. I have the same one. It's by
Hmm.
GSI, a company
Yes.
out of Connecticut. And again, you can get that at Dick's. You can get that at Amazon. So, is there anything else in terms of the gear that just works perfectly and that you really love?
Yeah. So one thing I didn't mention that I feel that's very important, especially when you're tent camping, is you're going to need a bin. Like, a camping bin is essential, because when you're RV camping, you have everything in your RV. Your cookware, your flatware, your plates, all that stuff. You don't have to think twice about it. It's in there. But you need a good bin that's going to fit the stuff that you need. Like, we had a frying pan and a pot, and a percolator coffee pot, and what else did we do? Just the cooking utensils, the spatulas, and things like that. And so, to have a bin to put all the daily use stuff, your dish soap, your sponges, your towels, that kind of stuff. And that I kept, right in the cooking area. And at night, I put that in the truck, because it does have, the smells of food on it. But a bin, like your camping bin when you go tent camping, is going to be like your best friend. And like, the beauty of a lot of this stuff is that there are a million different types of everything. There are coolers. You can get a million different types of coolers. You could spend $1 million, or you could spend $20. Bins, the same thing. You can get big bins with wheels. You can get, durable bins. You can get bins with snaps, that kind of stuff. That's what makes it fun. You go out there and you find the stuff that really appeals to you and kind of fits up the setting that you have in your head that you're going to make your camp setting with. I brought a smaller bin for our non-perishable goods, and um, then I have my classic the old Coleman cooler I have from my grandfather. I just can't get rid of it. It's not the most efficient cooler, but you know what? I have to use it. I just can't get rid of it.
Dude,
I'll
it
use it.
works for the weekend, man. Like,
Yeah,
that thing was
works for a
fine.
week. Exactly. And then
We both had all of our Coleman gear there. So you had a
yeah,
classic lantern. You mentioned you had the Coleman two-burner
mhm,
stove. You also had the Coleman oven. So we were like a bunch of, Boy Scouts playing with
nerds.
our Coleman stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, Coleman
totally
nerds.
camping nerds, nerding out
Mhm.
on it, having a blast.
Yeah,
Um,
but I love the
awesome.
Coleman stuff because it's reasonably priced. And if you're just getting started and you're not overdoing it in terms of going out into the wilderness and challenging yourself and stuff, it'll hold up nicely. And for a state park, a weekend, a long weekend, even a week out there, that's a price point that will make it an affordable thing for people to do. And it's kind of fun. They have a lot of good stuff. We set the gas lanterns under the canopy for our cooking station, and I bought my battery powered lanterns and a lantern fan for the inside of the tent. And, it was able to maintain some good comfort and not have to worry. You don't want to run a gas lantern in a tent. So, yeah, the battery stuff, a combination of the battery stuff and the gas stuff really works out nicely. And it, it's, it's fun because you're tailoring your space and your vacation to the way you want to like make it be. And that's like part of the adventure to me. That's what makes it fun.
And Phil, this was like training for me because, as you know, the next week I took Max and Theo and Wes and two of their friends tent camping.
Yeah.
And this was and with two other dads and all their kids.
Yeah.
So there was 13 of us. There were 3 dads and 10 kids. Tent camping,
Yeah.
Sandy Hook, New Jersey. And I'm so glad I did this trip with you as like the dry run to kind of up my game and to get organized. And then sort of, I didn't replicate your setup by any stretch of the imagination. But then when I went tent camping again, had a blast again. That trip you and
Mhm.
I went on really, really helped. Now, so the two of us had all of our classic Coleman gear. You have, a handful of really select pieces. I have tons and tons of classic Coleman gear. And, we were talking a lot about the classic Coleman lanterns and whatnot. And the trip ended with something of a camping miracle. It's almost kind of unbelievable this happened to you. It happened after I left. And we're gonna come back in a second. We're gonna end the podcast by talking about this camping miracle, which literally like the camping gods intervened and did something for Phil, which he deserves. But before we do that, we have a sponsored
Thanks.
message from our friends at Yogi Bear's Jellystone Park Camp Resorts. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We are here with Phil Travalia. We did our review of North South Lake and the Catskills, and we did a whole other segment on all of the tent camping gear that these two RV guys used. Now, Phil, I left just a little bit before you, and then you went to the recycling center on your way out, like a good, responsible camper, and something of a camping miracle occurred. Tell us what you found.
Yeah, it was like Christmas in May. It was great. Yeah, I brought in the trash and recycling, and I walk into the recycling center, and the way they have it set up is there's a table for glass and table for plastic and table for cardboards and paper, and then they had a table for tin and aluminum. And right in the middle of the table for tin and aluminum was a beautiful, like pristine shape Coleman stove. Now, I misspoke before. I told you I had a 413G. I actually had a 425G. What was
Right.
there? This was a 413G, and this is a bigger stove than the one that I had. And I almost fell over. I was like, what is this doing here? I think this thing's got to be trashed. So I went and I looked at and I opened it up. Perfect inside. The only thing that I noticed was that the wind blockers on the side and the burner right under the main burner had a ton of soot on them, and it stunk like kerosene. So what happened was somebody put the wrong fuel in this thing, had a huge flare up, and they said, "Oh my God, this thing's broken," and they threw it out.
It probably
And
totally
they emptied the
fireballed on them.
Yeah, yeah, and they emptied the tank and everything. There was nothing in the tank, but it reeked of kerosene. So I was like, I, I can't leave this wounded Coleman stove by itself, and I I threw it in the
And
back of the truck. I took it
oh,
home and cleaned
and I've
it.
wanted you to
It
get a
cleaned up, and the thing,
413.
yeah, it's bigger than the one that I have, the 425. It's more spacious. It's still a two burner. It's not overly big, and I cleaned it up. I put new fresh white fuel in it, and the thing works brand new. It was never used before. It actually works better than my 425 that I swear by and always use. And it was the greatest. I got a new stove out of the whole deal, and it was just an absolute blast. And
A
I was
thousand
thrilled
people
about
would have walked by that thing and not even looked at it. Like
it.
it
Yeah.
was literally left for you to supplement your collection. So now you've got the 425 and the 413. Literally,
Mhm.
you will have that. I know you. You will have
Yeah,
that stove for the rest of your life.
yeah,
It
yeah. I'll
found
pass
its
this
way
down to the
into
kids. They'll definitely
yeah,
use it.
it found its way to the perfect person. Did you check the year on that stove?
I did not get a chance to check the year, but I want to. I just had so much going on at home. But I would probably think that it's got to be probably made in like the 80s. I would say. I mean,
Might be a
it doesn't
70s
have
model.
what's that?
It might even be from the 70s. I mean, that may be a 50-year-old Coleman stove that you
Yeah,
rescued
yeah,
from the recycling center.
yeah. It was like I rescued an orphan child. Yes,
Phil, I cannot thank you
but
enough for first of all, I can't thank you enough for reserving the sites, yeah, reserving the site rather, making this trip happen. We both said up to the last second we were worried you wouldn't be able to go, I wouldn't be able to go just because of where our lives are at with the kids and family and all that stuff. But we did it. We made it
yeah,
happen. We pulled off a
we
weekend
did.
of tent camping. Got to see a beautiful campground in New York State. So thank you so much for really making it all happen.
Oh, you're welcome. It's absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for going with me because it's not easy to find folks to get out with and stuff. And but we wanted to do this. Like, we every for how many trips we talk, we got to go on a tent camping trip. We have to go on a tent camping trip. And so we finally made it happen. It was great. And we're going to try to get out there with the wives next. They're going to,
Yeah.
my wife is all in. She's Leslie said she's ready when we are, and we gotta do this again. We'll get Hector and Laura involved. It'll be nice. But I think it'll be we can start another little tradition. We can do like one side tent camping trip a year as a group, which would be a lot of fun. So,
Love
but
it.
I
I
really,
cannot wait. Cannot wait to see you again at the campground. Thank you, Phil.
oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the RV Atlas.
To find out more about the topics discussed on this show, head on over to thervatlas.com.
And to join the friendliest group of RVers, head on over to the RV Atlas group on Facebook and make sure to join us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at the RV Atlas.
If you enjoy our show, please consider leaving us a review over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
And we will see you at the campground.
See you at the campground.